Well, welcome everyone. So excited to have you here for Networking Without the Cringe, How to Slay Your Informational Interview. If you guys don't mind staying muted while Sierra and I present, we have a lot to go over. We're going to um, talk a lot, but we'll give everyone a resource at the end of our discussion so we can kind of chat over and you guys can take with you. I'll start with introductions. So my name is Jessica Mize. I'm calling in from Batavia, Illinois. I am the president of NEMPN. I'm also a curator at the Batavia Depot Museum. I'm also an adjunct instructor at Aurora University, so I'm all about supporting emerging museum professionals like myself, making sure that we have a really good, holistic, supported community of early museum professionals and beyond. So with that, I'll pass it over to my co-presenter.
And my name is Sierra Van Richtiger. My pronouns are she, her, and I am super excited to be here because I am one of the former co-presidents of National Emerging Museum Professionals Network, part of the old Sierra's presidential leadership era, but I'm excited to be here because I love working with emerging professionals of all backgrounds, but especially a very soft spot in my heart for emerging museum professionals. I am currently the Associate Educator of Academic and Research Programs at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, which is a very long-winded way of saying that I run our college internship program. So undergraduate and graduate internships all come through me, as well as working in all of our university level programming. So I always get to work with young folks and folks who are just starting their careers. And so it's always a pleasure to kind of get to dig in and talk about one of these very important topics, which is what even are informational interviews. And I think that this is one of those things that I'm going to summon the museum educator in me for a hot second. And I'm just going to ask folks who are in attendance to just drop in the chat when someone says informational interview, what are you thinking about? Like, what do you think is the definition?
And if you don't know, that's totally okay too.
That's totally fine too, yeah. I feel like we don't, like, we as a field do not define things like very smoothly, and some, like, we have a lot of acronyms and a lot of things that mean different things at the same time. Yes. Okay, so our first one is a conversation to learn about someone's career path. Love that. Learning about what they do for work because you're possibly interested in doing the same thing. Great. An interview that's meant as a way to get to know the company. Great. I think of an informational download coffee meeting up with someone to get all of their expertise on a certain topic. Great. Networking with someone more established than you. Could be informal or formal. Okay. A preliminary interview. Okay, great. A reference interview to get to the point of what they really need. Okay. All right. I'm going to start there with those, and please feel free to continue to drop into the chat. I know that it takes a minute to type. But we think of informational interviews, and we are working with the definition here as about a 15 to 30 minute. Of course, that time varies depending on what the person's availability is, as well as what your availability is. But we look at typically 15 to 30 minute informal, typically conversations with a person in a career field that interests you. And I love the call out of that. It could be formal or informal. Traditionally, informational interviews kind of lean more in a kind of like, they kind of split the difference, right? It is still required to be a professional opportunity. So you are trying to hold yourself very formally, very professionally, very maturely. But it's a little less formal than a traditional interview may be for a company, because the intention is not to be a job interview. It is meant to be an opportunity for you to learn from that person, whether it's learning more about the company or learning more about their career journey, or maybe learning more about their position in general. There's always something you can kind of tease out. And the informational interviews, thank you to all of the technological innovations that have come up, can now take place not only on over coffee in person, or in person at the institution or wherever you may go meet, but it could also happen online. So you can have a Zoom informational interview. You could do it on Teams or Google Meet like this. Some people do phone calls. But however you decide to take your informational interview, it's always a really great opportunity for you to get insightful and sometimes that fun, off the record, candid insights into what the career path looks like, or what the roles look like, what the organization's work culture is like, that you would not necessarily get at an interview stage. As someone who does interview, not just only for internships, but also for positions at the museum, I can tell you that I try my best to be as transparent as possible, but I'm the most transparent in my informational interviews because I'm not on the clock as always, and I'm not wearing my Met hat always. I am always wearing my Met hat as in nature of my role, but I'm not wearing it in the sense that I'm thinking about how I represent the organization, how this person understands the organization in a more professional setting. It's more of thinking about how do you understand I can get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty about the work culture. I'll tell you my honest thoughts about the cafeteria. I will tell you my thoughts about getting lost in the museum. Um, and like those are things I would not maybe necessarily dive into in a regular interview. And I think it's really important to note that it's not meant to be a job interview. I think the informational interview is literally meant to be an opportunity for you to connect with that person. Could it lead to a job interview? Yes, that's actually that's the dream, right? That's like the top tier goal. We're shooting for the moon. That's the goal. But it's really more of an information seeking mission. We're looking for an opportunity to learn information about that person, build connections, open a relationship, um, expand on our relationship, as well as get a deeper understanding about either the organization that they work for or the field or maybe the specific position that they have because maybe it's not common. Um, but it is meant to be a fact finding opportunity. But I want to talk a little bit, and I'm actually not going to be the person talking. I'm going to hand it over to Jess to talk a little bit about why even do an informational interview.
Yeah. So if it's not a job interview, like what is it for? So we kind of identified some points. The first one is to get that firsthand relevant information. As Sierra said, these are a little bit more candid conversations. You have that shorter window, and they might be able to share a little bit more information and more less like by the book information that they might share in a job interview that they could share in this informational interview format. Usually they can talk about the realities of particular positions, about an institution. You're like, hey, I've loved this institution forever, but what is it really like to work there? That's a great opportunity for an informational interview. And the last one is like specific different positions in the field. Like as you're looking at your museum career and you're like, hey, I've always done this thing. I want to reach out. I've in curation. So if I wanted to learn a little bit more about education programming, Sierra would be a great person to hop on an informational interview and kind of get that extra expertise. Um, I have used informational interviews for my grad program search a lot. I was trying to figure out what kind of grad program I wanted to go to, and also kind of after that grad program where I could possibly end up. And so it was a great time to connect with people working in the field that had gone through the grad program and kind of see what their experience was like and how it directly led them to a museum position, and then kind of see where I could follow that path. Other things is also to initiate a professional relationship. It's a great way to expand your network. If you see someone on LinkedIn, you're like, hey, it might be great to have this person in my network. You're really establishing a relationship and kind of starting out that process through this informational interview. And doing more of these informational interviews will actually really help you prepare for a formal job interview or an interview down the line for whatever purpose, because practice makes perfect. No one's like a great snatch at their first interview. So having informational interviews under your belt will make you feel a lot more comfortable when you're in that professional setting. So I think we can talk a little bit about how to reach out to people, because we've talked about the why and the what, but now we're getting on to the how.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say some of my favorite ways that people have reached out to me are definitely have been LinkedIn. Like folks have reached out on LinkedIn to just say like, I noticed you commenting on this topic and I'd love to hear more about your insights on this. I also really love a connection email. I get a lot of connections through colleagues that I have. And it's nice because they will come back and they'll say, oh, this is a great student who's looking to go into museum education, Sierra. Would you be able to chat with them? And since I already have the referral from the person, I already kind of have a little bit of an insight of what you're looking for, who you're working with, where you go to school, etc. So I think like those are some of my favorites, but I'm curious, Jess, what about you?
Yeah, so I am a cold email person, like, and I've gotten surprising amounts of feedback on that. So a few years ago, I was in the New York area and I really wanted to connect with Gia GFA, if anyone's familiar with their work.
No,
Um,
uh,
she's a digital arts um, amazing person. Used to work at the Guggenheim Museum and the Jewish Museum. And so I was like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what to do next in my career. Do I go to grad school? Do I start working in a museum? I wanted someone who was like great to connect with. And thankfully, she answered my cold email. So being a little bit brave is sometimes what you need to do to kind of do that reach out.
yeah, and I would also say that people in this field, I think especially, are incredibly generous with their
Mhm.
time. Like, we were all in the similar shoes before, and so even if they can't take like a full hour, they will, or they can't meet in person, they will try their best to try to squeeze it in because especially once you get to a certain position, like, it's hard to get into some of these roles, and to get a better sense of what's happening and, like, how we
Mhm.
move through the field, it's always great to kind of just connect and see if there's something you're missing or something that someone who is a little bit more senior in the field can kind of, like, look into for you. But I love the cold email, like, I think
Yeah.
that's great, yeah.
Maybe a little bit brave sometimes. Like
Yeah,
emails are pretty easy to find on museum pages, but even through LinkedIn, sometimes people have their emails and their contact information. But sending like a short personal note sometimes is the way to go to kind of get that yes for an informational interview.
yes. Um, I would also be curious to ask maybe, like, who are you reaching out to when you are thinking about informational? I know we've kind of touched on some of the bigger people, but, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so for me, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier with like my grad program. I was really looking at my institutional network and kind of who are alums that are in my area, who are at institutions that I would is my dream job to work at their institution and maybe in their department. Um, that was kind of like my broad scope, but I think back to your like connection email of like if there's someone that you used to work with and like they're connected with someone at another museum using your network to kind of have those e-introductions is a kind of a great way to figure out the who and really looking at like your career goals and kind of where you want to be and like what positions might be the most relevant.
I love that.
What
And I
about
mean,
you?
I feel like I need to, like, take a page from your book and start reaching out with, like, the audacity, like, to connect with people I wanna meet, like, when I was doing informational interviews, I was doing very much what we've been talking about, which is
Mhm.
reaching out to people in positions or at organizations I was super jazzed about. So, like, I was reaching out to, well, I have a little bit of an interesting background, but I did my undergrad in design and design history, and then my graduate degree is specifically in museum education. So yes, I literally did like a split between museum ed, but then it also was still like having my foot in design. So I was like asking people about exhibition design, but I was also asking about like maybe um graphic design in the museum space, which by that point I had like already fully like fallen in love with museum education, so it was kind of silly. Um but having that opportunity and then also having the opportunity to connect with Bank Street alumni, and it's just like a really fantastic opportunity, um, to just kind of connect and like see what they've been doing with the degree, especially since Bank Street is such a specialized program for museum ed. Um, and so, like, those are the kind of people I was reaching out to, but I find that I get when I'm reached out to by people, it's actually a breadth of people. It's students who are interested in just breaking into the field, and I think that another benefit to me is that I am a woman of color who works in the field, specifically a Black woman, and so I do get students who are, Black students who reach out and say, like, how did you get to your position? Like, I would love to hear about your journey, etc. So I also acknowledge that there is sometimes people just reaching out, because of who I am as a person, which is also really lovely. I'm always happy to chat and connect people with other colleagues, that may be of great interest to them.
Yeah, no, that shared identity is definitely like a part of it. Like if you're able to connect over something, it makes that ask a little bit easier. I'm reminded too, like I used to volunteer at the Midwest Museums Association conference, and whenever you volunteer or like participate in a professional conference, you usually get the invite list or like the roster of registrants, and that was kind of a resource that I used to kind of look at people who maybe I could relate to and kind of have the shared experience of being in the Midwest that we can maybe communicate over and kind of start that connection building.
Absolutely. And I feel like the informational interview has kind of pivoted a little bit also. So it's not just like we're not asking like fully like is this an informational interview? A lot of times, if I love the concept of going to a conference, so a lot of times we're asking for like a business card. And we're like, I'd
Mhm.
love to chat with you more about your position and the work that you're doing. And in that situation, like you take the business card and then you follow up to connect and make that meeting. And it's not going to be like, I would love to sit down and do an informational interview with you. Sometimes it's just, I would love to chat with you a little bit more about your work. So it doesn't have to be that formal, but I would say like the more senior the person is, the more formal the email
Yeah.
probably should be.
Mhm.
Um, that's my one pro tip. But speaking of pro tips,
Mhm.
let's say you've reached out to the person and now you need to prep for this interview. Jess, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so my go-to steps for prepping for an informational interview is to first really research the person and the organization. Like I want to be very knowledgeable. I want to make sure that I've looked over their LinkedIn, so I'm not really wasting their time asking basic questions. I feel like sometimes like you could ask someone about their experience, but you can kind of glean that a little bit off of their LinkedIn page or maybe what their profile is on their museum website. But having that kind of background lets you ask a lot better like information gathering questions and kind of really dig a little bit deeper. Also, kind of mentioned a little bit, but researching the organization, kind of seeing where it aligns with your career goals, or maybe if they've been in the news and there's a hot topic that you'd like a candid response on, kind of having that background is really helpful. And the next one is coming up with a really good list of questions, making sure that you have a few questions prepared ahead of time. We kind of talked earlier about it being like 15 to 30 minutes, which is pretty limited amount of time. So I usually come up with a whole bunch of questions and then choose like my top four that I want answered before the end of the interview. That way, I'm kind of prioritizing the conversation, but kind of seeing where it goes along the way. But about getting to the official interview, um, Sierra, how do you go about being the best you can at that interview?
My number one pro tip, and I get this from all of my mentors, and I tell all of my interns this, everyone I've spoken to, is that please arrive on time. You are asking someone out of the generosity of their time and availability and expertise to speak with you. Like, please be on time. If you can't be on time for whatever reason, in the city, we commonly have, we're like the subway. You just be doing things. And so, if you can, as much as possible, do communicate with that person to let them know that you'll be delayed, but like be open and transparent about your availability and your communication around getting to that location, but be there on time as much as possible. Early is on time. So 5 to 10 minutes for me is literally on time. I'm like, I need to be there early. If it's a friend that I've known for a while, I'll push it. But if it's someone new that I'm meeting for the first time, especially someone that I'm finally getting to meet that's maybe a higher level individual, I'm definitely coming on time. If it's in person, you can offer to buy their coffee. And you might be like, this person has makes like quadruple my salary. Why am I paying for a coffee? Again, they are being very generous and giving you time. And like I would say like most of the time they're like, no, 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 it's fine. Let me take care of it. But it's still nice to offer. It's like, you send an invite to your friend who lives 4 states away for your birthday party, and you're like, "There's a strong likelihood they won't come, but I still wanna invite them so they know that they're invited." Similar mindset. Um, when you kind of get there and you get settled, whether you're having coffee or not, make sure you introduce yourself. We want to know about you when you come to speak with us. Like you reached out to, especially if it's a cold email, I have know nothing about you. And so tell me about yourself and why you reached out to me. Are we shared alumni? Are we sorority sisters? Are we, do we go to do we grow up in the same area? Like, why are we in touch? You're looking to go into museum education, and then, like, let the conversation kind of flow naturally. Think of it as an opportunity. Again, think of it as a conversation, even if it feels stressful, even if you're, like, speaking to someone very high up. We are here to talk. We're not here to, like, conduct a formal interview. So come ready and prepared with questions like Jessica said, but also come like ready to kind of riff on those questions and like, modify based because sometimes you may come with a set of questions and that person might answer them in like the first the first like 4 minutes of your conversation and then you're like, wait. um while you're there, be mindful of the time as well as just like the amount of time that person is designated to you. That shows you're very respectful, you're great at project management and time management, which is also skill sets you want them to highlight for you if they are referring you to a position. And then you also want to make sure that you're taking notes, but you want to make sure that while you're taking notes, that it's not taking your note taking is not taking you away from the conversation. If someone is speaking to you and you're taking notes, you should still be actively listening so that so that you can make those pivots and connections. So if I'm like, oh, I'm reaching out to Jess because I've heard she's got a fantastic cinnamon roll recipe, and she's like going on. She's like, actually, I'm like a national award winning pie baker. Also, I if I'm writing notes about her cinnamon rolls, I also should be being like, oh, pies. What type of pies are you working on? Like, what else you got? Like, be able to build on that conversation more, and then maybe even pivot and say, like, how did you go from pies to cinnamon rolls? Like, how they're related? Are you using the same? Like, what's your secret? They may not tell you their secrets, but they will be able to kind of tie together how they got there. Or my favorite, the transparent. I don't know, it just happened. But remember your goals. I think Jessica was really right. Like, start the conversation with goals. Like, I'm here to talk to you because I want to learn more about the position. I want to learn more about being an archivist in the field. I want to learn more about exhibition design in a large institution. I want to learn more about science education. Have your goals so that even as the conversation flows, you have that in mind as you're asking questions. But it shouldn't feel like you have a paper in front of you going, Jess, I would love to know.
You want to be human, really.
Yes. You can always look back at your notes, but don't like treat it as if like you need to hide from us. We want to talk to you. If we're here talking, we want to talk to you. And if the conversation goes well, which it should, ask to stay in contact. And one of my favorite questions is always asking people, who else can I talk to? Who else would you recommend that I talk to? This informational interview is part of your networking. And so if they can make that connection from their network for you to better answer your questions. So again, if I'm talking to Jess about her conversation, we got into a lot of pie discourse, and she would say, you know what? I know another baker who switched from cinnamon rolls to pies, but also is now running a breakfast cafe. You should talk to her too. And those connections are the ones that are really meaningful. So that you can actually build on that and learn about the full breadth. Because one thing you'll hear about from museum professionals is that none of us have the same trajectory into the field. Like, some of us are pretty linear. I would consider myself fairly linear. But there are people who've gone and done like 9 million side quests before they even got into the museum field, or people who were like not supposed to, like, they were not intending to be in the museum field, and they were doing something else before they got here. And it's important to remember that we are all different, and so if someone can connect you for reasons outside of like the initial reason, great, run with that, learn more. You may be like, but Sierra, my goals, run with it. You don't know what you're going to learn, promise. But while you're there at the interview, speaking of the interview, before we wrap things up, what would you say are some of your like top interview questions?
I think I have some good ones. I'm gonna reference my notes a little bit, but like I really like asking like the day to day. That's kind of like an easy question to kind of start off the conversation and kind of know that you're interested in what their experience is like on a regular basis, and kind of lets them answer a little bit more candidly. Kind of get that like, what is the bread and butter of your job? That one's a kind of basic one. Usually too, I like relate my questions to like what my goals are. So like, how did you get, like, what was your career journey like to get to this organization? Kind of seeing where I might be able to fit into that, or how I can potentially share their path, is really helpful related to that career goals. It was really helpful when I was looking for grad school. Like, I got such like great information about people like from the field museum who were like, I love this program because of X. And I was able to kind of share what my conundrum was of deciding between two programs, and they were able to give me really helpful, honest feedback. How about you?
I look day to day too. I would also love to ask about if there are any professional organizations you recommend that I join or follow. I feel spoiled and lucky to be in New York City, and we have such an active like arts education and museum community. And I would say even our curatorial and like archivist community is very strong here. But like there's listening to the people at the source of listening to people at the source, like what is, who are you engaging with? And they might give you the inside because it's informational. They might give you the inside scoop, being like, you know what, that organization is not the one you want to join. You might want to join the other one because they actually have a great community. Or they might know something in like behind the scenes. They're like, actually, this group is starting an emerging museum professionals group. You should join, or we're doing a talk or something. Like, use it as an opportunity to kind of yes and.
Yeah.
Um, at every like most people will say join AAM because the American Alliance of Museums is kind of our overarching like US based national
Mhm.
organization. If you're speaking to folks in Canada, they'll tell you to do like CMA. But like they usually say the national ones, and then but there's usually professional orgs for like individual sectors
Mhm.
and types of work in the field, as well as things that kind of overlap. So I love the National Council on Public History because I am a historian by trade, but also I also want to like learn more from people who are public historians, which is kind of like a little bit of the work that I'm doing in
Mhm.
education as well. So it's like I get that overlap in that space as
Mhm.
well. And I'm also very in tune with preservationists and all that. So it's also great to kind of have those. But I would say the other question I love to ask about is what skills do you think would make someone who's
Mhm.
trying to enter this field successful? And I love that question because it changes all the time. Like we are like in a completely new era. Because if you ask someone like, "What do you need to know for museum education?" Um, like maybe 10 years ago, the answers may have been different than they are now. I mean, we all have our copy of Dewey, but like we are still having conversations about different pedagogies and teaching. We are working collaboratively to discuss more like community-based education. How are we approaching multilingual education, multimodal education, intergenerational education? We're having more conversations about all of these different kind of nuances that have been popping up. Digital humanities, technology in education. What is the role of AI in museum education, and how we interpret and share resources with the audiences? So those kinds of conversations will also be helpful on both sides, because I've found as an internship supervisor that like a lot of my interns are coming in now with like coding languages under their belt. They're so much more in tune with like applications like Airtable, and like some of them have done AutoCAD, and I'm like, what do you need to do AutoCAD for? But AutoCAD, like they have so much, there's such a breadth of experience coming in, and so if I know that they're coming in with this experience, I'm like, wait, I can leverage this. Like I can make sure that they have access to these things, or they can take part in this project starting very early on because I know that they have this experience. They're coming, or people are learning this in classrooms. Um,
That really speaks to like the mutual benefit that like an informational interview can have. Like whenever you ask someone for like a little bit of their time, like maybe you can actually be giving them stuff back too. So if you're a little like nervous or like trying to be a little bit brave, like know that you have a lot of value as you're kind of coming up in the career. And so that's so great to know that like even you've learned some things from
oh,
your
yes.
interviewers.
I'm always learning. I mean, my interns keep me on my toes. I'm always learning something from them. Um, but I would say like outside of all of that, I think the most important thing besides just like the questions that you're asking in the interview is how you wrap up the interview. It's not just the present, it's also the wrapping. Like when you go and you open your gifts on your birthday, you're looking for the pretty present. I mean, yes, we love the one that's a little messy. You're like, I know that you tried your best. But the beautifully wrapped up present is the one we're looking for, and that's how you want to approach your interview. So what are your tips and tricks for wrapping up an informational interview, Jess?
Yeah. So um I think like kind of ending on a question of like, is there someone you can recommend that I connect with? Kind of like opens the door to keep the conversation going. And also allows you to ask like if you can keep in touch or like make sure to ask if you can keep in touch. If especially if like the interview went well, like maybe you had like a vibe off and then, like you didn't have that great of an interaction, maybe don't ask it. But I think it never hurts to ask if you can keep in touch, especially if you learn something from that, because this is all about like relationship building. So even just like a connect on LinkedIn after that is really helpful. What about you, Sierra?
Do this one. My big thing is that I'm actually a split generation. I am a millennial, but I'm a split generation where we still send where people still want thank you notes. And I love thank you notes. My office is covered in thank you notes for my interns. And so I love a thank you note. Send a thank you note after 2 to 3 days. I'm sorry, after 1 to 2 days. You also can take the weekend. But It doesn't have to be a formal, like, card. I love a
Mhm.
card if you are and if you are in an interview, if you are in an, like, an in-person or in an internship, please send a thank you note to your supervisor. They will love you forever.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, project,
Right here.
yeah, I'm, like, literally looking the ones on the wall right now. But it makes the time feel worthwhile because you took the time out to thank us and, like, thank someone for their guidance. It also creates that connection point because you're like, okay, this is a handwritten note from so and so.
Mhm.
It reminds me, like I have the note, and I'm like, I have to actually email that person again. It's been a minute. Um, so those are opportunities as well to kind of make that additional connection. But I think like doing a two plus, like doing, I'm sorry, a yes and, where you're not just asking if you keep in touch, maybe keep in touch on LinkedIn or something like that, but you're also setting that thank you note as that first, leaving a good taste in their mouth after the conversation. But I know that Jess and I have talked a lot about things, but I think like, do you want to go over some of our like do's and don'ts
Yeah.
that we
I'm
have?
gonna answer too. I see one question in the
Oh
chat
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do a question.
from Jillian. Is there a trick to make informational interviews feel mutually beneficial? So before we move off of that, like thank you notes on like how to wrap up the interview, I feel like that's a great opportunity too to ask like if there's anyone in your network that you can introduce them to. Um, they've learned a little bit about you through this process, and that's a great way to be like, hey, thank you so much. If I can return the favor and introduce you to anyone in my network, please let me know. That makes it really mutually beneficial. It kind of shares that like you have a little bit of value, which kind of gives you a little bit more confidence, but it also just opens up the conversation to keep going. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say something similar. I would say, like, to keep it mutually beneficial, I love when people are like, "How can I support you or support your work?" Because sometimes I have things that are happening. Like, sometimes I have a program and I'm like, "You know what? I do need, like, support on this program. Are you available on XYZ day to come and support?" Or maybe there's a question around, "Could you tell me more about the position or tell me more about, the work that you do?" And I'm like, "You know what? You're actually making me think about creating something that is a little helpful for folks to get to learn a little bit more about my specific role, and it might even trigger something else for them to remind them to like do something. Depending on what kind of position that you're in, they might be doing some user testing. I know that some of my design folks and our digital team, like they're constantly doing user testing or evaluation, and so like they might be like, oh, would you and your like colleagues be willing, or you and your classmates be willing to like do this thing for us because we are trying to get like a young perspective or get someone else's perspective on this. And again, those are opportunities to kind of keep that relationship going, keep it flowing. So don't be afraid to ask, like, is there any way I can support you in your work, or anything I can share. I think, as Jess said, is always great to try to make it be mutually beneficial. Sometimes they will come through the table and tell you how to make it mutually beneficial. Like there have been times where I've sat down and be like, I need you actually to tell me like what are you looking for in an internship right now? Like what are you looking for when you're like looking around? And that's actually incredibly helpful because I'm hearing directly from the source, and those are the people I'm working with, not like the general vibe of an intern. Like it's actually like a real person in front of me that I can actually tell me more about what they're seeking in the application experience or the larger like hiring process that I can actually work with, and then say, no, no, I actually literally spoke to a real person who told me this face to face, and that's great.
I've also seen that too, like especially like there's lots of benefits of being a student, but one of those is like you're kind of naturally in a network that is attractive to employers. So I've totally been on the receiving end of like, oh, actually, I've been trying to connect with someone in the career office to post our internships or something like that. Like it's a great segue, and then like them having that connection just makes those yeses for other people a lot easier.
Exactly. I like that's the one. I would also, I think, like, if I can slide into our do's and don'ts,
Yeah.
another mutually beneficial thing is to keep in touch.
Mhm.
And but also, if you're keeping in touch, please keep track of your contacts. I yearn for the days of a Rolodex. Like, I feel like I might get one anyway because I think I just need, I think I need one. Like, I want to be able to like pull out a card and then have my little notes underneath, and have my conversations that way. But you can have it in any way. You can have a business card holder, you can have a journal that you track it, a spreadsheet, I live, eat, pray, Airtable. They have not sponsored me, but but they could any day.
They should.
Um, if we were connected with them. um, but that's a great way to keep track of your context, but also those touch points, because there will come a time in your life, or if you're me, where you're just like, you meet so many people and sometimes you just forget. It's
Mhm.
helpful to kind of go
Mhm.
back and say like, Jessica. Yes, I remember where I met Jessica. I met
Mhm.
Jessica. We had coffee together. Yes, and cinnamon roll. And okay, yes, all coming back to me. Very helpful.
Mhm.
Because and what the intention is that the relationship is ongoing, right?
Right.
So there might be a moment, where Jessica floats off into the ether and decides to
Mhm.
go do something else. Maybe she like takes a break. She goes on sabbatical. She finds herself. She prays loves. She comes back to the field. She might reach out, and you'll be like, "Who is Jessica? It's been like 5 years." Um,
And
you
making
have all
peace
that
with
information.
it. Yeah.
So you have all that. Yeah.
I think another like do for me is like we kind of touched on a little bit, like letting the conversation flow. Like you kind of want to feel a little bit more natural, but like if they're kind of going off into another direction, like let the interviewee speak. Like they might share a lot of things that you didn't even think to ask. And so that's really helpful. It might be more beneficial to you in the long run.
Yeah.
Um, the other one is to like kind of on the other side of that is to be curious. Like if there's ever something you wanted to know, like say, I hope this isn't too much to ask, but like what is it really like to work at X institution? Um, just so that you kind of get that it lets them be a little bit more candid, but like being a little brave and curious shows that genuine enthusiasm and it will more likely to elicit a response. Really.
And I think that's like, I think the being curious and get like the yes and to the being curious is also like asking questions you actually want the answers to.
Mhm.
Like, don't just ask the questions because you're like, I asked ChatGPT what questions I should ask in this informational interview, and these feel good to me. No, genuinely, if you sit down and you ask yourself, what do I need to know to move forward, whether it's a internship, fellowship, application, like who knows, um, just getting to know this person. Again, going back to your goals, what do you want to know and what are you trying to get out of this conversation? And then ask the questions that are going to get you there.
Mhm.
And but like again, still letting it be a conversation at the same time with whatever, but like know that you're going into that conversation. I am going into this conversation to talk to this person for XYZ reason. And if even if they do XYZ ABC, I still got X, Y, and Z, which is what I wanted to find out. So that is incredibly helpful. But then again, do not ask questions that you don't want the answers to. This is going back to that listening
Yeah.
thing I was talking about before. Don't ask questions and say like, so if I do I need to go to school for this program? Um, if you're asking like a conservator, yes. Yeah. You know that. You know you have to go to school as a conservator.
Mhm. That
Um,
goes back to, like, doing that research beforehand, like, if you can find it through a Google search, maybe don't ask it.
Yes, and that's a huge lift as well because
Mhm.
you have a limited amount of time with them, so you're not trying to get into this conversation like, "Oh, I don't know anything at all. I just thought you were cool and I wanna" No, no. Value their time and
Mhm.
come ready. A lot of times people have public Instagrams or they have public social media, LinkedIn something. Maybe they
Mhm.
have a interview from their job that they've done, with more information about them that you can utilize to answer your questions. If they do not, how did you even find out about this person? Like, how
Mhm.
do you know this person? Like, dig deeper. Why are you meeting this person?
I
What
think,
about your don'ts?
um, don'ts. So I think my big one is, like, ask for a job outright.
Oh,
Like, that's a big no-no. Like, it's understandable that, like, the economic workforce is really bad out there. Everyone
oh,
knows
it's
it's really
trash
bad.
right now. I'm not gonna lie.
But like if you're asking for an informational interview, like they're not prepared to offer you a job. Like that's not really the purpose or the goal of the conversation. It should really just be a fact finding mission, and let job opportunities maybe come more naturally, or just be on the lookout at their institution so that maybe in the next couple weeks, if you see a job that's related, you can reconnect with them and like keep in touch and be like, oh yeah, like hey, I saw that this opportunity came up. Would you mind? Do you have any more information I could share? Or like do you know who I should contact? That like really shows that like there is a benefit to being on the information side and you're not just trying to use them to get a job.
Exactly. Yeah, don't come being like, I know there's a job open in XYZ department. Can you get me a job? Almost never. Almost
Mhm.
never can I do that for you.
Mhm.
But you can ask questions about the hiring process. I can tell you a little
Mhm.
bit more about the hiring process, how long it was for me. It varies.
Mhm.
But it's helpful. That's helpful information. I would say don't go over the agreed upon time that you had. So if we were supposed to meet from 2:30 to 3:30, at 3:25, we should be like, you know what, can I just like one final question? I know time is running short. I know you gotta go. Um, or if you're like, this conversation is rich, like
Mhm.
I'm dug in. Like, do you have an extra like 5 to 10 minutes
Mhm.
to just like finish this like conversation?
Mhm.
And if they say no, don't take it personally. They're busy.
Okay.
We're all but my calendar looks awful right now. It is very busy.
I'm
It's not
hiding
personal.
in the way for this right now.
I'm like looking at my Google Calendar on my other screen. I'm like, "Hmm." um, but ask. A lot of times, sometimes people are better at scheduling than me, and they are, they have a space, and they're like, oh, you know what, I do have an extra like 30 minutes. Like, yes,
Mhm.
let's talk. Or they might say, you know what, I do have to run to another meeting.
Mhm.
Let's set up another time to talk and continue this conversation. And then you're already like halfway there to the relationship because they already told
Mhm.
you to follow up with them. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
I have to follow up anyway. Um,
Mhm.
even better.
Mhm.
I would also say I don't know how you both feel about this either, Jess, but like I would never ask about pay unless I was asking about ranges.
Mhm.
Like, what is a good starting range for someone in this field? Just like I'm trying to get a sense of like, what it
Mhm.
looks like. Especially if you're a career changer, that's a very big question to
Yeah.
ask. Like,
Mhm.
if you're coming from engineering and now you want to go do, buildings,
Mhm.
that's a shift,
Yeah.
or you're coming from for profit, it's good to get a good sense of like what the range could look like.
Yeah.
And we don't have an active salary collection process right now. Like we had the art museum transparency spreadsheet that was out in like 2019. We haven't done anything of a similar scope in a very long time. And so like that information is kind of lost, and we've lost the
Yeah.
ancient text, folks.
And so
And so we really should bring it back.
too that like I don't know a budget that was in 2019 is even super relevant to 2026. Like so many different things have happened.
I don't know. Yeah, so things
Um,
have changed.
yeah.
Um,
Really for me that I found to like kind of work around that like salary question. Never, I totally agree. Never ask outright pay. Like that's usually a very sensitive topic. But I've kind of brought in to informational interview conversations, like my legitimate fears about the field. So
mhm,
I had a really great conversation with someone being like, "Hey, I have student loan debt. Like, is the public service loan forgiveness something that like actually works? Like, what is your experience kind of going through this? Like, do you feel like this is a field or a position or an organization in which you can really thrive, or like not asking them outright, but like presenting your fear and like asking them to either reassure you or be like, yeah, unfortunately, that is a fear. Because I think this informational interview gives you like the great, like candid perspective, and they might be willing to answer something like that.
absolutely. And I would also say, and we say this as educators also, we hate close-ended questions. Unless I'm leading you somewhere and I need you to answer this question, don't ask yes or no questions. Like
Mhm.
ask questions that you're going to get rich, meaty information that is goal-oriented,
Mhm.
that you're going to get out of the conversation. Don't just ask like, "Are you a curator?"
Mhm.
It's like, "Yes."
You get to touch the collection.
May I come touch your collection? Like those things we can't. There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah. I feel like related to like making sure that you're asking the relevant questions for the person that you're asking for. So like if you're like really want to know about fundraising, but you've connected with someone in the education department, don't ask them about the fundraising department. Like you're like, hey, find a different segue as opposed to like asking something that they might not even have knowledge about for that institution.
Yeah. Yeah, be again, this is all leaning back to like doing your research. Like you have to
Mhm.
do interview prep. You cannot just roll up into your interview not knowing anything unless you're like already an expert on this person, borderline sketch. But unless you're already like very familiar with this person and this and
Mhm.
their work, and you're just literally just getting ready, um, make sure you are doing your research. And even if you are feeling very confident, just like double check that they haven't done something. 'Cause we all are out here doing a little bit of something. Um, but that being said, we do want to turn it over and ask if anyone has any questions. I do want to uplift what Samantha is saying in the chat, where
Mhm,
we love those salaries. I want the salary surveys to come back. Actually, that was
mhm.
like a part that we lost. That was something we lost in the pandemic that I want to come back. We lost
Yeah.
museum Twitter and we lost salary survey.
Museum Twitter, yeah, that was sad.
That was a tremendous loss.
I think while we're waiting for questions to come in, one of my last little like do's that I like to say, and I kind of use this like little mantra throughout my entire life, but it's assume good. Like if you don't get a response back, never take it personally. Or like if you didn't have a good informational interview, it might have been an off day. Assuming good allows you to believe that everyone's human and some people have off days and it's never about you or something that you did necessarily. So walking kind of through this informational interview path of like if you get a ghosting, like sometimes people are crazy busy. Our calendars are very crazy as Sierra and I have shared. So it's never, I think, a personal thing if you don't get a response. Like it's more often than not just not enough time to make that. Maybe that wasn't the best person to meet and you'll meet somebody else.
Sometimes people are just busy. I've had people email me back like 6 months later, being like, "I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
I was out sick, and then I had so many other things going on, and now I actually have 5 minutes to chat with you." And I'm like, "Okay, great, let's chat." Um, but yes, I love that. Don't assume the worst. Like they just want to talk to you. Um, any other questions? Oh, okay, great.
Hi, my question is, I was wondering your experiences, if you've had any experiences of people asking to shadow you, what that situation was like. Was it like a 1 day shadow? Was it like a week? And what was that follow up after, as someone, as like if when someone is coming to you with those questions and wanting to gain experience?
I mean, Jess, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, I haven't personally been asked for that, but it might not be up to me if that's something that I could offer, unfortunately. Like, I think I'd usually counter offer that, unless my boss and their directors higher up has said, yes, that's an okay use of your time. Just knowing that like someone might be around for the whole day is kind of a big ask. So it might be a great opportunity and you might find the right person to do that, but it might be a great ask after an informational interview just to kind of start that relationship off before you kind of ask for that next step. But I think if I've never thought about having someone shadow me, but I might be totally up for it in the future.
Okay. I unfortunately have a very HR heavy job with and deal with a lot of confidential information. So I am not someone that can be shadowed. And so I often do not get requests for shadowing. And when I do get requests, I'm like, I absolutely can't. Um, because unfortunately, every day, my day to day is not the same. And so depending on what phase of the internship process we're in, I may not be able to be shadowed at all. Like sometimes my staff can't even be in my office when stuff is going on. So
Yeah.
um that's a yeah, I know, right? Like but that's also a part of the reason why I do carve out moments to talk about my work during stuff like this or internship program because I do want to share more about the work that I do. I just can't always have someone with me while that's happening. We had a really good question in the chat.
I think I got
And yes.
from Beckett.
Yes.
As someone who is really interested in intersectionality of disability advocacy in museums, I've really struggled to find a network for furthering my education experience in the field. Is there anything that I can do to find more resources? We love resources questions.
Um,
Here, what are your first thoughts?
my first thought is lead, like the Kennedy Center group. I don't know what's happening right now with it. I don't know. But that access network has always like been incredibly helpful as I've kind of moved through accessibility related things. The Smithsonian also has an accessibility
Mhm.
office that often, or not even often, they used to have workshops, but they periodically do have conversations as well. Um, and then I would also maybe tap into what is available in your area. I would again very biased. I work in New York City. I don't live here, but I work in New York City. But I know that I used to live nearby the not live. I used to work nearby the Braille and low vision library of the New York Public Library, and so like they were a great network. We used to connect with organizations that work specifically with folks with disabilities, visual disabilities, and so those were incredible resources just to connect with that community, and folks who worked with them. And then also we have the Museum Access Consortium, MAC, in New York City. So that they are also very active and a great group to work with. Depending on where you're located, those may not exist. But those are also great kind of headways. Like, where are the folks with disability in your area or the area you're hoping to work in based? And then I would also say that in order to kind of build on that network, reach out to someone who is working in an access team at a museum, and sometimes that is just like a cold email on the like actual email address, or going on LinkedIn and finding that person. It is incredibly challenging, but those folks, I know, like my colleagues who do that work now, like they know that it's hard. As a very niche part of the education world, and well, actually not even education, public programming, and like, access is like an all-encompassing department. Or team. And so I think that that would be a good start. But I've always loved LEAD as one of the resources. I know that was a huge conference that like they used to host that was really beautifully done, and all the access people used to go to it.
Yeah. A trend I'm seeing too is there's lots of like disability consultants who kind of like, will come into museum institutions specifically and kind of give an accessibility report and kind of make recommendations or do staff trainings. And so I've connected with several people through like educational webinars hosted by like regional museum associations. Gaylord Archival had a neurodivergent speaker. So there's lots of like individual consultants doing that work, and it might be good to connect with them and kind of seeing maybe who's in your area that might be able to help you with that resource gathering and networking. But a big trend too, so like if you're looking at museum conferences and seeing if like disability resources are one of like their pillars for proposals, that might be a good conference to volunteer at, or get a scholarship for to go and attend.
Yes, it's also incredibly helpful. I used to volunteer at 8 a.m. all the time so that I would get to afford to go when it was on the East Coast. And now I finally work somewhere that will pay for me to go. But it's,
I love recommending volunteering, like for museum conferences specifically. Usually they'll give you free registration to kind of help with a little bit of the labor of the conference, and you do usually get a lot back from it. For me, I'm an introverted person, so it's a lot easier to be like, I have a job and I have a reason to make conversations with strangers by asking them like if they're enjoying the conference, if they need any help navigating. It kind of lets you have a little bit of confidence in that space with that job, so it's a great way to get started. Sean also shared there was a great neurodivergency with EMP earlier today, and the folks that ran it have their information out there. So
yes.
Yeah. Little shameful plug, NEMPN has a Discord. It's kind of a growing population and might be another great resource to tap into to see what other people are doing across the US.
Yes, and I want to uplift what Samantha was saying, that people are trying to get around access and not invest in it properly by asking us of other museum professionals. That's going to happen in every single sector. Like, I mean, it's all about. I love I'm paraphrasing, but I love the phraseology of like the budget is a values document, like a values-based document, because if you're not investing in accessibility, like you are saying that accessibility is not important. And I think that goes like I think that's just, it's very telling. If you can't put money towards making sure that your space is accessible at the bare minimum of ADA compliant, at the bare minimum of making, well, I mean, you have to be ADA compliant, but like making sure that it's more than ADA compliant, making sure that people can access your spaces. I used to work in a museum where like literally if you were a staff member, you could not be disabled to work there because you couldn't get into the building, the staff building. Like it and like it was an old building, so like they were like, well, we'll get there when we get there. Like that, those kinds of things are like mind-boggling to me. But those kinds of, again, the budget is a living document. It's something that it's a living values document that says like these are things that are important. We are so generous of a field, and we're too generous of a field actually sometimes.
I'm looking through my notes real quick. So I have a notebook that I specifically keep for all my webinars and like conference sessions that I go to. And there was a great conversation at the Midwest Museums Conference from Dr. DeAndrea Matthews from the Detroit Zoological Society. And she was kind of sharing about as like DEI programs are being dismantled, it's so hard, it's so easy to dismantle them if they're their own department and they're not integrated in the institution's operations. So if you have a department for accessibility, it might be easier to cut as opposed to having accessibility as a part of your entire institution.
Exactly. And it should be. I'll say it out there for any of you future museum leadership, future museum directors and creators. Access should be built into every single part of the work that you're doing, from your application for hiring staff to how people engage with your space to how people eat in your space, all of that. And it's like accessibility is not just about, because one of the other things I get for accessibility, people are like, is it free tickets and letting people into the museum? And I'm like, that's not it. It is a form of accessibility as reducing financial barriers, yes. But I'm talking about, if someone is blind or low vision, how can they get into your space? And how can they appreciate the artwork or whatever is on view in your space? If someone is hard of hearing, how are they going to know if there's an emergency in the building if all you have are alarms and no visual cues? If someone is using a mobility device, can they get to all the pieces in the institution without having to call ahead? Like, all those things that we have to think about. And I mean, I wish that it was better. I mean, I'm not going to say that the net is perfect. Like, we've done a lot of work. But making sure that the space is accessible, I think shouting out what Sean was saying, making sure accessibility is available for not just patrons, but also staff is incredibly important. So, like, making sure you have accommodations for your staff and not making them feel guilty for taking accommodations is like a huge thing as well. It's crazy how many times I've heard from people. They're like, I would never think to ask for an accommodation because I don't want them to think less of me or like to change things. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like, if you need something, like, I mean, we're not going to come up with an adult IEP. You need to advocate for yourself and what you need.
To bring it back to like our session on informational interviews, like if accessibility is one of your values that you want to make sure is in the workplace that you're going to be at, like informational interviews are a great place to ask that. Like in the formal interview process, they might have specific things that HR has told them they can't share, or like they can't like outright approve accommodations. But like if you can kind of share that in an informal space, that kind of gives you a lot better picture of the institution and kind of like the position as a whole.
Absolutely. Well, Jess, do you want to share our speaking of resources that we've been dropping and sharing, do you want to share our resource that we've created?
Yeah, let me pull it up. So we have sending over a Google Drive link with our little handy dandy Slay Your Informational Interview sheet. Feel free to download. We'll share it also after this with the recording, but it has a nice checklist of like prepping, doing the interview, following up, as well as kind of the do's and don'ts and sample questions we talked about.
Yeah. And we are accessible on LinkedIn, so please feel free to add us. My name is still Sierra Van Richter. Like, you can find me. I'm the one and only.
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn, Jessica Mize, MEIS. I'm trying to find my little LinkedIn note, but feel free to look me up. I'm happy to connect. And if anyone's interested in an informational interview, you know how to ask a great one. Ask for a great one. So.
Yay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.